In 1923, at the edge of a forgotten road, there stood a mansion no one dared to approach after sunset. Its iron gates groaned in the wind, and its windows reflected light in ways that made people look twice, and then quickly look away. Locals said the house felt alive, as if it watched anyone who came too close. Still, when the Harrington family purchased the mansion, they believed the rumors were nothing more than superstition. The Harringtons were wealthy, respected, and confident. A father, a mother, and their 2 children arrived with carriages full of furniture, paintings, and laughter. At first, everything seemed normal. But within weeks, servants began to quit without explanation. Those who stayed whispered about footsteps echoing through empty hallways, doors opening on their own, and a strange crying sound that drifted through the mansion late at night. Neighbors noticed changes in the family. Curtains remained closed all day. Lights flickered at odd hours. The children were no longer seen playing in the garden. One visitor claimed, "Mr. Harrington spoke to someone who wasn't there, his eyes fixed on a dark corner of the room." Mrs. Harrington stopped attending social gatherings, and when she was seen, she looked pale, exhausted, and terrified. On one cold autumn night, the mansion's lights burned brighter than ever before. Screams were heard, short, sharp, and suddenly cut off. By morning, silence had swallowed the house. When neighbors finally gathered the courage to enter, they found the front door unlocked and the mansion eerily still. Inside, breakfast sat untouched on the dining table. Coats hung neatly by the entrance. Beds looked slept in, yet every member of the Harrington family was gone. There were no signs of struggle. No blood, no forced doors or windows. Even the family dog had vanished. Police searched the mansion room by room. In the basement, they discovered scratch marks on the walls, as if someone had tried desperately to escape. A hidden door was found behind a bookshelf, leading to narrow passages that twisted deep beneath the house. The tunnels ended abruptly, sealed by solid stone, as if they had never been meant to be opened. No bodies were ever found. No ransom note was sent. The case was quietly closed, labeled an unsolved mystery. Years later, those who pass the mansion still report lights turning on by themselves. Some claim they hear children laughing from the upper floors. Others say a family can be seen standing at the windows, watching, waiting, trapped forever inside the house that never let them leave. The mansion stood far from the nearest town, surrounded by dead trees that never bloomed, no matter the season. A narrow road led to it, cracked and overgrown, as if nature itself was trying to erase the path. Travelers avoided that road, claiming the air grew heavier the closer one came. And even the wind seemed to lose its voice near the gates. By day, the mansion looked abandoned, but by night, its shadow stretched unnaturally long across the land, as though it were reaching for something. Long before anyone lived there, the land was known for strange occurrences. Animals refused to cross its boundaries. Birds would fall silent when flying overhead. Locals believed the ground was cursed, that something beneath the mansion was older than the building itself. Every family who attempted to settle there left within months, some without explanation, others leaving behind their belongings as if fleeing in terror. The mansion had no nearby neighbors, no comforting lights in the distance. When storms came, it stood alone against the thunder, its walls echoing with hollow sounds that did not match the wind. People said that at night, a faint glow appeared in the upper windows, even when the house was empty. Those who claimed to see it also spoke of whispers, carried through the darkness, calling out names that no one recognized. Isolation wrapped around the mansion like a prison. Once inside, the world beyond its gates felt impossibly far away. Time seemed to slow, and silence pressed in from every direction. It was not just a house separated from society. It was a place cut off from reality itself, waiting patiently for the next souls brave enough to enter. In the spring of 1923, a wealthy family arrived at the mansion with an air of confidence that unsettled the locals. They came in polished automobiles, dressed in fine coats and hats, carrying themselves as people who believed money could shield them from any danger. The father was a successful industrialist, known for his sharp mind and unshakable authority. His wife was elegant and reserved, her smile practiced but her eyes observant, as if she sensed more than she ever spoke. Their 2 children, a boy and a girl, explored the property with curiosity, unaware of the heavy silence that followed them wherever they went. The family dismissed every warning they heard. They laughed at the townspeople, who whispered about curses and disappearances, calling such stories foolish legends meant to scare outsiders away. To them, the mansion was a symbol of power and legacy, a place where they would host grand dinners and build a future untouched by fear. They filled the halls with expensive furniture, portraits, and chandeliers that cast long, trembling shadows across the walls at night. At first, they seemed determined to tame the mansion. Music played from the upper floors, and laughter echoed through rooms that had been silent for years. Servants were hired, gardens were restored, and lights burned late into the night. Yet beneath their wealth and confidence, something slowly began to change. The father grew distant, often locking himself in his study for hours. The mother complained of nightmares she could not remember, but woke from screaming. The children spoke of a presence in the house, someone who watched them from doorways and mirrors, though no one was ever there. Despite their riches and influence, the mansion did not welcome them. It observed them, learned their routines, and closed in around their lives. The family had moved in believing they owned the house, unaware that, in 1923, they had stepped into a place that was never meant to be owned, only endured. Not long after the family settled in, the mansion began to speak in ways that could not be explained. At night, heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors, even when everyone was accounted for. Doors creaked open slowly on their own, stopping just wide enough to reveal darkness beyond. From inside the walls came faint knocking sounds, irregular and deliberate, as if someone were trying to communicate from the other side. When servants searched for the source, the noises would abruptly stop, leaving behind an unbearable silence. Shadows behaved unnaturally inside the house. They stretched longer than the objects casting them and moved when nothing else did. Candles flickered without wind, projecting figures that crawled along the walls and ceilings. The children claimed their shadows didn't always follow them, sometimes lagging behind, sometimes standing still while they walked away. Mirrors reflected shapes that vanished the moment someone turned around. No matter how many lamps were lit, certain corners of the mansion remained completely dark. The family's behavior slowly began to change. The father started waking in the middle of the night, convinced someone was calling his name from the basement. He became obsessed with old documents and blueprints of the house, mumbling about rooms that shouldn't exist. The mother stopped sleeping altogether, pacing the halls until dawn, whispering prayers under her breath. She insisted the mansion was watching them, learning their fears, feeding on their presence. The children were the most affected. They spoke casually about a quiet man who stood at the end of the hallway and a woman who sang from behind locked doors. Their laughter faded, replaced by long moments of staring into empty space. When asked what they were looking at, they would answer with unsettling calm, saying someone was standing right there. By the time the disappearance occurred, the family no longer acted like people living in a house. They behaved like prisoners waiting for something inevitable to happen. On the final night, the mansion felt different even from a distance. Neighbors later said the air was unnaturally still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. No wind stirred the trees, no insects made a sound, and the road leading to the house seemed darker than usual. Yet every window of the mansion glowed with light, brighter than anyone had ever seen before, casting sharp reflections that flickered like warning signals in the darkness. As the night deepened, strange sounds drifted across the land. A low, distant hum echoed from the direction of the house, rising and falling like a slow, tortured breath. Then came the screams, sudden, desperate, and unmistakably human. They were not loud enough to pinpoint, but clear enough to freeze those who heard them in place. Just as quickly as they began, they were cut off, replaced by a heavy silence that felt far more terrifying. Some neighbors claimed they saw movement behind the windows, frantic shadows racing from room to room, figures pressing against the glass, as if trying to escape. One witness swore the front doors opened wide, yet no one emerged. Another said the lights flickered violently, floor by floor, until only a single window at the top remained lit. Around midnight, the mansion went completely dark. No final scream, no crash, no sign of struggle, just sudden, absolute silence. Dogs in the area howled relentlessly, and no one dared approach the property. Everyone sensed that something irreversible had occurred, that whatever haunted the mansion had finally acted. By morning, the house stood as calm as ever, but those who had felt the fear in their bones knew the family would never be seen again. When the mansion was finally entered after the disappearance, the stillness inside was unbearable. Several rooms were found locked from the outside, their heavy doors sealed, as if someone had been deliberately trapped within. Police forced them open one by one, expecting chaos, but instead they found perfection, beds neatly made, furniture undisturbed, an air thick with dust that suggested no one had entered or left in days. It was as though time had stopped the moment the doors were shut. Personal belongings lay exactly where they had last been used. Jewelry rested on dressing tables, untouched and gleaming. Letters remained half-written, pens dried mid-sentence. A child's toy train sat frozen on its track, as if waiting for small hands that would never return. In the dining room, fine china was arranged for a meal that was never eaten. Food long cold but never spoiled, as though the house itself refused to let the moment pass. The most disturbing discovery was the absence of disorder. No signs of panic, no broken objects, no struggle of any kind. Clothes hung neatly in closets, shoes aligned carefully by the stairs. Even valuables were left behind, dismissing the idea of robbery or escape. It felt less like a crime scene and more like a carefully staged illusion. One meant to convince anyone who entered that the family might return at any second. In one locked room, deep marks were found on the inside of the door, carved by fingernails or something far less human. Whatever had been inside had tried desperately to get out, yet the rest of the mansion showed no reaction, no response, no mercy. The untouched belongings told a chilling story, not of people who chose to leave, but of a family taken suddenly, silently, and completely, leaving behind everything except themselves. As police moved deeper into the mansion, the clues they uncovered were subtle, but deeply disturbing. There were no obvious signs of violence, yet the house felt wrong, as if it were hiding something in plain sight. In the father's study, officers found stacks of handwritten notes scattered across the desk and floor. The writing grew more frantic on each page, repeating phrases about voices beneath the walls and rooms that changed positions overnight. Some sentences trailed off mid-word, as though the writer had been interrupted suddenly. In the basement, investigators noticed that the temperature dropped sharply, far colder than the rest of the house. The walls were scarred with long, uneven scratches, too deep and too high to have been made by human hands alone. Candles had melted down to their bases, arranged in a crude circle around a dark stain on the floor that could not be identified. No blood was detected, yet the air carried a heavy, metallic smell that made officers uneasy. Upstairs, children's bedrooms revealed the most unsettling clues. Crude drawings were taped to the walls, showing tall, shadow-like figures with hollow eyes standing beside small stick-figure children. One drawing showed a family behind bars, while another depicted a staircase that led into complete darkness. When asked, no one could explain how long the drawings had been there, or why no adult had noticed them sooner. Perhaps the most chilling discovery was a grandfather clock in the main hall. Its hands were frozen at exactly 12:17. The estimated time the screams were heard. Despite being fully functional, the clock refused to move when repaired, stopping at the same time again and again. To the police, these clues did not point to a crime that could be solved, but to something far worse, an unseen presence that left behind evidence not to be understood, only feared. Long before the police completed their investigation, whispers spread about parts of the mansion that were never meant to be found. Old blueprints recovered from town records showed inconsistencies, hallways that ended abruptly, rooms that appeared on paper, but not in reality, and empty spaces between walls that should not have existed. Those who studied the plans claimed the mansion was larger on the inside than it appeared from the outside, a detail that unsettled even the most experienced investigators. Hidden passages were rumored to run beneath the floors and behind the walls, accessible only through doors disguised as bookcases, fireplaces, or mirrors. Some officers believed they had briefly found one such passage, only for it to vanish when they returned with others. A narrow staircase was reported by multiple witnesses, descending into darkness behind the basement wall. Yet no physical evidence of it could ever be confirmed. The most terrifying stories centered on forbidden rooms, spaces that resisted discovery. Doors would appear in familiar hallways and disappear hours later. When forced open, some rooms were said to be completely empty, while others were unnaturally cold and silent, absorbing sound as if sound itself was forbidden there. One officer claimed he entered a room with no windows, no furniture, and no exit except the door he came through, only to find that the door had vanished behind him. According to rumor, these rooms were not part of the mansion's original design, but were created over time, shaped by whatever presence lived within the house. They were said to trap those who entered, folding space and time until escape became impossible. Though none of these passages or rooms could be officially documented, the stories persisted, growing darker with each retelling. Many believed the Harrington family did not leave the mansion at all. They were simply swallowed by parts of the house no one was ever meant to see. After the disappearance, the mansion was sealed and left untouched, but it did not fall silent. Even with no one living inside, lights were seen turning on and off at random hours, illuminating empty rooms, as if someone were still moving through them. Neighbors reported hearing footsteps pacing across the upper floors, slow and deliberate, followed by doors closing softly, one after another. The sounds carried the weight of routine, as though the house continued its life without its inhabitants. Those who dared to approach described an overwhelming sensation of being watched. The windows reflected shapes that did not belong to anyone standing outside, and shadows gathered behind the glass, shifting even when no light source changed. Some claimed to see figures standing at the windows late at night. A man, a woman, and two smaller shapes, perfectly still, staring outward before fading into darkness. Over the years, trespassers and investigators attempted to enter the mansion, but few stayed long. Compasses malfunctioned, watches stopped, and people became disoriented, forgetting which rooms they had already searched. One caretaker quit after a single night, insisting he heard a child whisper his name from inside a locked room. Another claimed the house rearranged itself, trapping him in a hallway that seemed to stretch endlessly. Even decades later, the mansion refuses to become just another abandoned building. The air around it remains cold, the ground beneath it lifeless. Locals avoid the area entirely, believing the house remembers everyone who enters. They say the Harrington family never truly disappeared. The mansion simply kept them, and it is still waiting, patient and aware, for the next presence to add to its silent collection. And so the mansion still stands unchanged, watching the road that no longer leads anywhere. No gravestones mark the fate of the family. No answers rest in police files, and no explanation has ever survived the walls of that house. What happened in 1923 was not a disappearance. It was an erasure. The mansion did not kill them, and it did not let them escape. It simply absorbed them, quietly and completely, the way it has always done. And on certain nights, when the lights flicker inside and shadows move behind empty windows, it feels less like an abandoned house and more like a home that is already occupied.